Yeah.
And what I noticed was that after lockdown, people started talking about this quiet quitting thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to think that this has something to do with not just Gen Z and millennials and whatnot. I think a lot of people, and as you alluded to it in the reports you just quoted, are going through this phase of quiet quitting, or I think back in the day maybe it might have been considered working to rule, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Very
yeah,
true.
it's kind of, it reminds me of that as well.
Mm.
And I just thought it'd be interesting to talk about, because it seems to be so many people in the workplace are going through something where they find the work isn't fulfilling them, or maybe there's, you know, the purpose is missing or lacking.
But it's very interesting because you mentioned the working to rule. So the whole concept of quiet quitting is almost a reinvention of the wheel,
Mm.
because it has been done before. But usually, the quiet quitting was done in times of industrial action. So it may have been that your part of your union had decided that um, we were going to only do what is required, and hurt the profit margin.
Contractually. Yep.
Yeah, exactly
Hmm.
that. But in the research that I've done, this is a little bit more than that, and this is continual. There isn't necessarily a union involved. It may well be a personal decision by someone who, for whatever reason, they're not happy in their job, or they're not happy with things that are going on around them. They've made the decision to basically just do as contractually required, which is quite an interesting thing, because we work in a world now where profit is king, growth is paramount. There is no such thing as being able to just toe the line. You need to be doing your very best and making effort. But that doesn't appear to be the consensus when we talk about quiet quitting. I have an example which I wanted to bring up about. It happened in Japan. I don't know if you've done any research about this, but in Japan, there's a concept called Shokunin. If I am bastardizing the pronunciation of that word, please, can I apologize now, as Japanese is not my second, third, fifth, or 20th language. But I believe the concept is called Shokunin, which refers to an artisan who is deeply dedicated to their craft, always striving for perfection in what they make. Quiet quitting, in the Japanese example, is the complete opposite of that. It's
Mm.
about divorcing your ego from what you're doing for a living and not striving for perfection. Setting boundaries and simply completing tasks you're supposed to complete within the time that you are paid to do it, with no extra thrills. There's no extra work, there's no extra effort, just doing as is contractually, you are obligated to do.
Now,
Which is,
sorry to cut you, right?
yeah.
You've managed or are managing. I've managed. What? How do you see that as a manager? And do you? I have found that I've seen managers that are quiet quitting as well. It's not just employees. There's right up the chain, I guess,
Yeah.
until you're playing golf on the during the day. You know, a lot of people are quiet quitting because they
Yeah.
don't find their work fulfilling. And talking about the way that the Japanese see it, that actually makes perfect sense, because that talks about finding purpose in your art, the
Mm.
artisan, from the artisan's perspective. And so, yeah, but
Well,
what is wrong with working to what you are contractually obligated to work?
because the model, as I think I said at the very beginning, the model of capitalism, the model of work in the industrial world is growth. It is
Mm.
pushing yourself forwards. It's doing more to get more. The problem,
if you're the employee.
the problem I see, and I think there's quite a few connections that that were brought out when I was doing the research here. The first connection, especially with the Japanese example, because the Japanese example is the oldest example. So the whole concept of that started in that area. Now, let me explain. Let me give you an explanation of what was going on at the time. Japan had gone through massive growth, massive growth. They were the biggest economy. You know, we're talking about the early 80s. They were the industrial, electronic heartland of the world. You didn't have a telly, a video, a computer that wasn't made in Japan. And house prices rocketed to the point where, the real estate in Japan was more expensive than Buckingham Palace. I mean, we're talking, it was eye-watering how expensive everything got in Japan. And then the bubble burst. It popped, like massively popped. And Japan went through, and is still going through, decades of deflation. There is no growth. There is no there's no light at the end of the tunnel if you were born at that time. So if you were born in around that time, you've grown up in a world where everything is the same. There's no growth. There's no, there isn't the big shining companies that are standing out and are doing really well. You're watching other countries doing that. Now, that buildup of the bubble before it burst, Japanese workers were sleeping at work. They were sleeping at their desk. They were.
I read about this. People were dying.
Quite literally, the whole ethos of work. It was work. It really was. But there was growth at the end of the tunnel. There was bonuses. There was, living a great life. There was the drinks and the parties and the homes, and that lifestyle was there. And then the bubble burst, and it burst in such a way that people just lost everything. Many people were wiped out. Savings, homes, pensions, all of those kind of things got completely wiped out, and they had nothing. And so the next generation growing up had nothing to look forward to, because they were in a world of deflation. So there was no growth. There was no, carrot to aim for. And so this concept of just doing the basics came out. Now I want to fast forward that to lockdown, to the financial crisis. So actually, before lockdown, we've had financial crises in Europe, in the world. We've been hit very hard. People have been wiped out. They've lost their pensions. They've lost their bonuses. They've lost their savings. They've lost their money. They've lost their homes. There's a parallel here, that the next generation growing up are looking at this and thinking, well, my dad worked really hard to get stuff. Yep. And he was lucky. Maybe he's got a home. Maybe he bought his house and he's lucky and he still got it. But I have not got that opportunity. What is the point of me striving to get nothing? To be broke. Be broke. What is the point of trying to go further up the chain when my manager would do my legs anyway? Anything I do well will only be claimed by the manager above me, and he will do well. Can you see? There's absolutely. It sounds funny. I was when I was doing the research on this, there was a statistic that I just thought would be really, really key to put in at this moment. When we work out the percentage of the workforce in play right now, baby boomers who were born between 1946 and 1960 make up 19% of the workforce. Generation X, born between 1965 and 1980 make up 35.5% of the workforce. Millennials, who were born between 1981 and 1996, make up 39.4% of the workforce.
Wow.
The biggest percentage of people now in the workforce were born between 1981 and 1996. They sit smack bang within the period where the markets went pop. Literally, when they came to adulthood and they got to start working and they started paying taxes and they started becoming part of, voting and doing all of these things,
Yep.
they became adults at almost the perfect wrong time.
Definitely.
And they are the biggest percentage of people who have quietly quit. There is a link there, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Which is quite scary.
That's quite scary or dangerous.
Yeah. And just as an added bit of info, there will be 10,000 baby boomers retiring, with 10,000 baby boomers per day will be reaching the age of 65 right now until 2030. Obviously, that's just plain mathematics, where they will no longer be part of the workforce.
Yep.
At the present moment in time, that 19% is draining most of the profit. So the smallest number of workforce is making the most money.
Yep.
They're the ones that are getting the biggest bonuses. They're the ones that are enjoying the benefits of the pre-burst, the pre bubble being, popping.
Wow.
So when you look at that and you put that into perspective, you start to think, well, if that's if that 19% currently are the ones that are doing the best, then Generation X, well, they got screwed over because they just missed it. They just missed,
Yep.
and they got what was left because obviously the baby was cleaned up.
That's right.
And it's funny. I don't know if you've noticed this in your world, but I've noticed. I had no problems with the baby boomers. I never had an issue. I didn't even. It's going to sound odd, but I didn't even consider them. I just was like, yeah, there's people at work. I don't want to break us into generational things. There was no. I didn't even know there were generational, sections. Until the millennials came into the world. Because when the millennials came into the world, they were like, hang on a second. Where's my bite of the pie?
Yeah. But do you know what I think that is down to? That's down to us not having the information to hand.
Yeah.
And the millennials have grown up with the internet and they've seen the information. So they have this. So they literally know exactly where to point the finger.
Yeah,
say,
where we
just thought this is the way it is.
Well, what was the model? The model that we knew was you go to school, you educate yourself. If you can, you go to further education, which at the time was free.
Yep.
Much to the annoyance of millennials. You get a degree. That degree will open up even more doors to you that would be closed if you didn't have a degree. And you get to work and you don't owe anybody because your degree was paid for by the state. So advantage again.
Yep.
And then we, as the next generation on, went, okay, well, we'll do that again. Oh no, your generation is going to have to pay for education. Like, don't get me wrong, it's a grant and you'll be all right. We'll look after you. It won't be so bad, but you might have to pay back a little bit of percentage of the education. But it's okay. Don't worry. You're going to be paying too much. And we were like, okay. So we went to university and we came out and we got our degree and we were like, yeah, this is great. We get good jobs and we're doing really well. And then you get millennials and the door got shut. It's like, no. You're going to get into debt, like extreme debt to get an education. You are going to pay for it yourself. There will be no handout. There will be no grant. It will be a loan that will be paid back. So screwed.
Somebody
So when you
saw a business opportunity, didn't they?
yeah. So your starting salary in your good job, big chunk of that's got to go towards debt repayment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you are someone who is quietly quitting, and I'll be honest with you, I researched this and went, makes perfect sense, because nothing makes someone move forwards. Nothing gives someone more of an encouragement than a prize at the end of it. You know, someone who's running a race, they know that if they win, they get the gold. You know, if you're playing a game of football and you score a goal, you win. You could win. There's always something to say. Well done. You've done well. We are now going to thank you for that.
Yep.
But we're now living in a very different world where, one, you could work as hard as you want. You could do as much. You could sacrifice your weekends. You could sacrifice, oh, I can't go to my daughter's birthday party because I've got a meeting that I need to go to. I just have to be there because I'm so important. And then you could get called into the office and they say, we're downsizing. Thank you very much for your efforts, but we no longer want you to work here. As simple as that. And it is cheaper to remove someone who earns less than it would be to remove somebody who doesn't cost them as much money. So again, the advantage is there to being not in this current generation. And actually, I wonder what, is it Generation Z? What's the next one? What's the one
Gen
after
Z.
Millennium?
Gen Z.
Which Gen Z? They are the ones that are, or Gen Z. Sorry, I can't say.
Gen Z.
I'm English. The concept of Gen Z, I think, is going to be even doubly worse, because millennials will complain and say, "Oh, how am I going to either get on the ladder or, how am I going to do X, Y, and Z?"
Well, don't you think that there's the influencer lifestyle that you see across all of social media?
Yeah.
And there is that Gen Z that are basically saying, I don't want to work a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
I'm going to find my own way. And whether it's moving and backpacking around in Thailand and vlogging and making your money, teaching people how to move to Thailand and backpack and vlog, they're going to find their own way that's different from
I think that the
traditional.
I think that the whole working model is over. That's my take on what I have realized, that this model will not work in 30 years' time, because the problem you're going to have is that there is no advantage to losing time. Time is the one thing. So in reality, my employer will take 40, 50 hours of my time and will pay me for that time. And it's up to me to decide whether that hourly rate is acceptable to me for that time. And obviously your hourly rate will be maybe higher than mine or lower than mine, and it's up to you to decide whether you agree with that or not. Well, that model has completely been shattered. I just see that model has, we may not have noticed it yet, but there are a couple of things that have, again, come out as a result of this show, or, of doing research here. So the birth rate in Japan died. People didn't have children. And so the model that we follow of work was always that I will retire and the next generation behind me will work. Will pay for my pension. I die, then that person working will work. They get to pension age and the person behind them will work and they'll pay for their pension, and the cycle continues. Until we messed with the birth rate of families. When we made it expensive to have children, that model went into the toilet. And that's why I say that the model that we see now, it physically cannot continue, because we're not having babies across the world. Populations are dropping, like falling. Like European numbers are low, Asian numbers are low. I think South Korea has one of the lowest birth rates in the world. Japan
Really?
isn't too far behind it.
Okay.
There are many countries that are basically getting top heavy, where there's lots of old people and not enough young people. So that model just won't work. And
they're asking people to move to these places and start families, aren't they? And paying them.
As I don't know if you saw yesterday or a couple of days ago, there was a party political debate, and one of the actual leaders said, "I want to encourage families to have more babies," and that was quite a shocking statement. But actually, it's because they've seen ahead. They're looking at the demise of the model that we have at the moment, because there's not enough babies being born. This generation will be the last one if we're not careful.
If you follow it to its natural conclusion, what does that equals? What's the equal sign if there's nobody else here?
A massive population drop. Massive.
There's nobody to pay the tax bill and
so services will fail.
And then what does that mean?
So there was a documentary about, I'll see if I can find it, but there was a documentary about entire villages, towns in Japan downsizing. Now imagine it, you and I, we have our children, we've got our 3-4 bedroom house, and our kids fly the nest, and it's just me and the missus, you and your missus, and we think, let's just downsize the house. We don't need a big place. We'll just get we'll buy a little flat somewhere, nice little garden. The kids can, maybe a couple beds. We don't need much more than that because we're downsizing. Now that makes sense, because obviously you haven't got to spend as much money. You haven't got to worry about, overheads, council tax, all that kind of things, and blah, blah, blah. But imagine an entire town doing that. Imagine a town saying, we don't need a hospital. There's not that many of us. We don't need a library. We can downsize because there's a library in the next town down the road. We don't need to have, that shop there because we can downsize. That is the reality.
Everything. Yeah.
That is the reality in Japan. So schools are closing, nurseries are closing, secondary schools are closing because they have there's no pupils to go there. It's amazing. It's almost a window to the future in terms of
what it makes me feel when I say equal sign, what I feel like, what I think is gonna happen is that, but they're not telling you, is that has to lead to immigration. You have to bring people in then. No?
Yeah, you do.
To keep things going.
You need to
until you find another model, or you figure out a new, a successor to capitalism, or you revamp capitalism, or whatever the case may be.
There will be, I believe, coalition countries. we had separate individual European countries, and then when they realized that we need to be stronger, we had a European Union. Who's to say that there won't be coalition countries in years to come? We already share military bases, and who knows what the future may hold. We don't know.
Funny you say. Just on the side note, and this just did you see that they passed a law in America yesterday about 16 to 24-year-old men
enlisting?
Yeah.
National service. Yes. Yeah.
We'll talk about this after the pod.
Yeah. We'll go into that later.
Yeah.
Wow. So listen to this, right? So this one particular person that was interviewed, and I took some notes down from what they said. They said there's no more kowtowing to a boss or to customers, no more working nights and weekends, or incessantly checking emails. Workaholism is I can't pronounce that word. Workaholism. How do you say that word?
Yeah, like a workaholic.
Yeah, like a workaholic. Workaholism is out. Coasting is in. Call it the work-life balance manifesto.
Wow.
Imagine that.
Wow.
Call it the work-life balance manifesto. It's perfect.
But I
Now,
get
only 6%. So keeping in mind that the earlier statistic I gave you was that 10% in the UK were actively still on the grind, still trying to make something of themselves, still putting themselves out. Well, in Japan, only 6% of the workforce is engaged. It is one of the lowest readings in the world, while a third of the workforce is job hunting or looking out for new opportunities. Now, this is also part of the Gallup State of the Global Workplace Report 2024. Now, this person said, I recently learned about this term called quiet quitting, where you're not outright quitting your job, but you're quitting the idea of going above and beyond. You're still performing your duties, but you're no longer subscribing to the hustle culture mentality that work has to be your life. The reality is it's not. And your worth as a person is not defined by your labor.
That's a quote.
Preach.
Yeah, that's a quote. That's a quote, man. Yeah.
Honestly, it made me realize, and it's something that you and I have spoken before. There are many times where I don't give the millennials the credit they deserve, because so to put it into example, so before the baby boomers, you had the silent generation. Now, the silent generation went to war. The reason why the baby boomers have what they have is because they didn't have a generation before them taking it from them. The generation before them were dead. They were either blown up in the Second World War, died of scurvy or polio or something like that, because we didn't have the kind of technology we have. And there was a massive vacuum. When the soldiers that did return from the Second World War came home, they had babies. They just went on a baby boomer extravaganza. Technology advanced. We did amazing things. We also did some horrible things, but we did some amazing things when it comes to technology. Sent people to the moon, allegedly. We did all manner of different things that were, outstanding.
Yeah.
And then they had babies, and those babies continued the idea of exponential growth. Keep fighting, keep going, keep going, keep going. And then reality set in. It was, yeah, I know you want to build that factory, but the fossil fuels you're burning are killing us. So you can't do that. Or, yeah, I understand that you want to completely destroy the rainforest, but we need the rainforest to
breathe.
To breathe. I know, we need trees. Trees are vital for human life. Yes, we know that you want to experiment those drugs, but you're not allowed to. And so things started to slow down. And with that slowing down, I think you get our generation, we're going like, well, we still want a bite of the pot. We still want some of it, what's left over. We may have got a little bit of it, but we didn't get a great deal. And, we're kind of gutted, but then at least we got more than the millennials, because they got nothing.
Yeah, yeah.
And so they have created a completely different concept of work.
Yep.
So, and
that's what I'm saying. I don't think that they're lazy. The narrative that's come about is just, I think they're looking at life through clearer lenses than we ever did.
Yeah.
That's my
opinion. And I think that you and me, we're both the same. I know that if you are feeling sick, unless you're bleeding from your eyes, you're going to work. Because it's just built into us. It's built into our minds. We go to work. There is responsibility. We have responsibilities. We're managers. We have to look after things and this, that, and the other. And my wife is a different generation to me. So when I'm sick and she says, just don't go in, the job ain't going nowhere.
It's not your first go-to, is it? No.
Do you get what I'm saying? And it's we are very, very different in our mindsets, because she is a millennial. So her idea is, well, I'm not going to kill myself for this job, because it is just a job. It's just a means to an end.
Here's the interesting thing, that why I wanted us to talk about this is that now, like I said, post-lockdown, it's not just the millennials and the Gen Zs that are thinking about this. There's lots of people there's a study the other day, I should have found it, but people who are over 50 who are quiet quitting, who are planning to not work for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
because you know, you get it will be 70 before we can retire and stuff like that. By the time we're probably more than that.
But I still feel like the 50-year-old quiet quitter still probably owns his home. You know, he's still got an advantage over the millennial. The millennial is having to tackle with, you know, exorbitant rents, and you know, if they can get on the housing ladder, you know, if Bank of Mum and Dad had enough money, you know, equity in their house to give to their kids, then yeah, they were able to get on the ladder. But they themselves are experiencing. Do you know? It's funny. I didn't realize this, and it's probably because it's not something that we would necessarily notice. But when we bought homes with interest rates high. We never think there was never this moment of, what do you mean you don't know what an interest rate is? Because many people who bought homes in the last 10 years bought homes in a period where there was no interest rate. It was like 0.001 or something ridiculous.
Like a 1%.
Where we were so it was like for us, it was like, it was like 6%. Like, it's just part and parcel of reality. You are going to buy a home. It's going to go up in price. Your mortgage is going to go up. You're going to need to renegotiate and blah, blah, blah. Well, I got the biggest shock of my life when I was talking to some colleagues at work, and they were like, oh man, I've got to go to the bank. Why? Because I've got to not renegotiate, remortgage. And I was like, yeah, I've got to remortgage. Yeah, that's normal. Yeah, but it's going to be like 5%. Like, I was like, yeah. yeah, mate, I can't do that. I mean, I'm already paying 1,200 quid, you know, and you're like, oh, so that, gotcha.
And that was on like a 1% mortgage, 2% mortgage.
Wow.
So the mortgage is doubling.
Now I understand.
The
situation. The situation is dire, and it's very worrying. Now, if you didn't get on the ladder and you were not there, and you're thinking, well, if it was hard enough to buy something on 0.001, well, it's nigh on impossible at 4%, 5% and above. And it's sad. And it's why I believe, as part of, and we'll carry on, as part of this whole quiet quitting trend, I don't think it's going to go away. I think it's going to get worse. And I think that what will happen is, because there is it's something that even I've realized myself, there are no thanks at all for going out. There's no thanks. There's just none. There,
and that's why, to me, I'm kind of like working to rule. A lot of people do it anyway because they've realized, oh, okay, my boss is a psycho or a sociopath or whatever, and he's never gonna, I'm not gonna get promoted. People here, stay here, da da da.
Yeah.
If you think like that, do you see what I mean, though?
Oh, mate, trust me.
Yeah.
I sit there and I think, I get it.
Yeah.
I don't know if
I really understand it. I'm not.
I think it does go down to what's the ethos? What is it? What part? What how do you see yourself, and what are your values? Now, if your core values are, I want to do the best for my family, I want to make sure that I am respected among my peers and all these kind of things, then quiet quitting just cannot work. It just will never exist. It won't exist in your world. But then you do get to a point where you think, I work for somebody who doesn't appreciate or doesn't see any value in what I do. Why would I go any further than what I'm doing? Because there's no point.
That was one of the number one reasons: lack of recognition. Poor work-life balance. Wages being poor, no advancement. I've always said that people don't leave bad jobs; they leave bad managers. I genuinely believe that. I don't think that they leave. That Gallup poll that you was talking about, it said that globally 60% of the world, around the world, are quiet quitting,
which is worrying, because keeping in mind, with that 60%, remember the makeup of who makes that 60%. We're talking,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the baby boomers is 19%.
Mm.
We are now, you know, the Generation X and the millennials are slowly moving
Mm-hmm.
away, because
Yep.
obviously Generation X are getting older. We're dying. You know,
Yep.
there's, you know,
Yep.
there's immigrating, retiring, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so the burden of responsibility now to make decisions in the workforce is falling onto millennials, because they're 39%.
Wow, I didn't know it was that much.
Yeah, so it's baby boomers 19%, Generation X 35.5%, millennials 39%,
Mm.
and generation and by 2030, Generation Z will make up 30% of the workforce. So,
Ooh.
you know, in 6 years time, the baby boomers will be gone because they'll have retired, they'll have hit
Mm-hmm.
65. Don't get me wrong, I've already spoken about the returnees. You know,
Mm.
baby boomers have not retired.
Yeah.
They've gone
Yeah.
back. They've gone back into the workforce. They're not
Some
retiring.
can't afford to retire.
Some can't afford to. Exactly. They
Mm.
didn't look after. You know, that pension time bomb is just waiting to happen. But
Mm.
what's interesting is if you don't, if you live within your means. So if you say, right, I'm just going to take my wage, no overtime, quite happy, you'll get your pension.
Yep.
Your pension, you know, your pension will pay out for whatever, and you could just carry on. It's what you do in that time then when you're not working, because I might call you and you say, oh yeah, Johnny, I'm here, there, and everywhere because I'm having to do some extra work here. I'm having to do extra work there, because that's just how you work. I'm the same. We know we work.
Mm-hmm.
And so our time is spent doing other people's bidding.
Yeah.
So when we started talking about doing this YouTube show, this was going to be something that we were going to do together in our time.
Yep.
It's a project that's something that you and I were going to do. Our creativity, our creative mind came about outside of work. And you may have, I know that I've experienced some negativity over it. I know that there's been a few, hurdles along the way in terms of what I can say and how I can say it and this, that, and the other. But it hasn't stopped my ability to be able to do what I want to do. I think I can read between the lines there. and so that's our creativity. Now we're doing it now. I look at it now that the millennials are doing it 10, 20 years earlier.
Yeah.
They're already looking at,
They're
this
already
is what
there.
I do during the day, but I'm going to be doing this outside to improve my opportunities further down the road. You know,
absolutely.
This channel that has been going for a while now is growing. It's growing because we're putting effort in, and hopefully people that watch what we do buy into that and help to encourage us to do more, you know. And keeping that in mind, if you're still watching, please hit the thumbs up for me and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I always forget to say that, but I'm not going to forget this time. So hit the thumbs up, people. Thank you. But yeah, it's that idea that you could work all week, be really tired, have no time for your kids, no time to go out with the missus. You just want to sleep. And then you get to about 6 o'clock Sunday afternoon, and then you suddenly realize, I've got to go work tomorrow. I've got things to do now. I've got to try and rush, because whereby when you don't have that mentality, you've got time on a Monday.
It's a horrible ratio, 5 to 2. That's a terrible ratio. Whoever came up with that.
Did you get what I mean?
Yeah,
suddenly you can now finish work, because I know it is partly to do with age as well. Like the younger you are, the more energy you have.
Of course.
So, you know, when I hear colleagues say, oh, what did you do last night? Oh, I went to the pub and I played darts with my friends, or I played some snooker, or I went to a show. And I'm like, midweek? You did what? Midweek? You went out? You had a life?
But you remember what? Don't you remember those days?
I do remember those days, because we used to go out.
Yeah, exactly.
But what I'm saying is that it feels like there's more of an energy to do it whenever they want. You know, it was,
I
you know,
would I
I
would
knew
agree
that.
with you. Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. I would agree with you. I've
Yeah.
noticed that people are out. If I'm working and I'm doing nights or whatever, I can
Yeah.
be out Monday night, Tuesday night working,
Yeah.
and I'm coming in 3, 4 in the morning or whatever, and the streets are buzzing on like Monday nights, Tuesday
Yeah.
mornings,
Yeah.
Tuesday night. Yeah, so everyone is just
Yeah.
living. I guess it's working to live and not living to work, and I
Yeah.
think that's what they've got the right way round, I guess, for me anyway.
And that's going to be the issue. Is, as you said, it's when we think of work-life balance. For many people, work-life balance is work, overtime, and balance.
Yeah,
It's not work, basic, and
yeah.
and life.
It's
It's
work. It's work
it's
overtime and bow.
and yeah, do you get what I mean? And
Yeah.
that concept is,
Mm,
so I've got my basic. I want to do a little bit more to bump up the money, and
mm.
then that then gives me the opportunity to do other things, which is, which is fair enough.
But
But
that
what I'm
balance
saying
has
is
to
that
fit into like,
the
yeah,
window for
it's
opportunity when you
much
then
smaller.
do that, and I am the epitome of that. That
Mm,
I would work long hours, but then there was always a goal. That, the
yep.
goal may have been, I want to purchase a camera, or I want to spend money for a holiday, or there was always something that we were working towards. Why I would do extra. I
Yep.
sacrificed time with my kids and with my wife and family because I was looking at expanding and making things better.
Mm,
Well, I think if I was a younger person now, I would be I would have more plates spinning,
yep.
because my job is my provider. Where I work is provides me with a living, a living to go on and do what I want to do, and that is my main um, form of income.
Yep.
But the generations I see now have multiple streams of revenue. They're not just thinking about getting their wage at the end of the month. Thank you very much. Spend it. What have I got left? They're thinking about
Trading forex,
trading, affiliate
stock,
marketing.
shares,
Yeah,
marketing. Yep.
yeah. Do you know what I
Hmm.
mean? There's so many other spinning plates to make
Mm,
sure that they can do that. And yeah, they're busy in other ways, but
mm.
it then takes away a certain amount of the reliance on their day job, which again explains
Makes
why
sense.
I have seen in my in my limited years, a number of young people walk out of jobs, just walk out,
Mm.
like don't care. And I sit and go, like, what? You
Yeah.
quit? Like talking them out of it when they're walking out the door. No, 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 don't quit, quit, quit. Like, I give it a day, think about it. And they're like, no, I'm all right. I'm
Mm.
good.
Do you know that there's a newer trend that's called loud quitting,
Go
which
for
is
it.
where
Explain.
the young ones now will quit and post exit. It's all posted on the internet. So whether it's them walking out of their job and they're filming themselves talking as they're leaving their job or whatever, and yeah, so that's loud quitting.
Loud
Yeah.
quitting. See,
Mm.
see, as I said, the idea is, and this is something that maybe is conditioning. You want to, I always feel like if I'm going to leave a job, I want to leave that job with my head up high.
Mm.
I've never ever returned to a job that I've left. I've never done it. I've That's just not for any reason. I've just never ever gone from one job and then gone back to it,
Yeah,
because there was never any. I always felt like I was leaving a job to find a better one.
there's a reason why you've gone. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a reason why
Mm.
I've gone. I don't think that reason will have changed for me to go back.
Mm. Mm.
So I've just gone from one job and then into another job, and I'm generally staying jobs quite long. That's the thing. It's not like I jump, 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 jump. But when that time is for me to go, I go
Mm.
with my head up high. I almost feel like it's a little bit beneath me to then start bad mouthing, because you know. But
So
that's
you're not.
just me, and that's my mentality. Obviously, there are lots of people that'll be like, "Yeah, do you know what?
Oh
I'm
yeah.
going to get on TikTok and let everyone know that
My
you're rubbish."
manager's a psychopath. Yeah,
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 you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
So yeah. So basically, this person that they were talking about in Japan, they said, Actively disengaged workers may often be trapped in jobs they do not like because of economic reasons. So we've also got a factor that there are people who are no longer going out and beyond because it's a wage.
Yeah.
They're not gonna go out of the way. They're not gonna make any extra effort, and it's quite noticeable that they're making extra effort. It will be noticed to other people, and then I think where it becomes even more interesting is when you can see someone has quietly quit,
Yep.
and the manager of that person doesn't challenge them, doesn't do anything, but then will add extra work to everybody else, and you think, I don't understand that. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay, but let's look at that, right?
Yeah,
That then is predicated on the fact that everybody is being exploited and having to do more than they are contracted for.
yeah, yeah, yes,
No? So do you see what I mean? It's like,
yeah.
okay, so you're saying more people have to. So you're saying that this whole thing was working based on the fact that everyone was being exploited. So
Yeah.
people are working 2 hours extra overtime and not getting paid for it, for example.
Oh, I see what you mean. Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think it's that. I think most people are paid for what they do. If you are working and not getting paid for it, you need to challenge it, because I would like to think that no one works for free, but then there
No,
are lots of
a
businesses where
lot
it's
of
implied.
a lot of
Yeah, I
people in
know.
the city will tell you
Yeah,
that they are working and they're doing a good 10, 12
I
hours a
know, it's
week
insane.
overtime for nothing.
I know. I draw the line there because, as you said, your time is, the contract is, I give you my time, you pay me.
Yeah.
It's not I give you my time and you don't pay me, because that time's mine.
Mhm.
I'm now working in my time,
Yep.
and my time, I want to be doing things with it, being creative, doing other
That's
things,
right.
having other opportunities. And that's the thing. The concept of now going, actually, there are other ways in which to create wealth without it having to just be your day job. There are
Hmm.
other things that you can do to be able to look after yourself. And if you do it right, you could quietly quit. You
Yeah.
could work because you know that, hey, I'm just doing this because this is my base. This pays the mortgage,
Hmm.
but everything else pays for the holidays, pays for the, kids clubs and this, that, and the other, and holidays and whatnot, but that covers the rent, the mortgage, that covers the gas, the electricity, the basics.
And I think if you've managed to get that balance right, where
Yeah.
you are just doing not just doing enough, but you're doing what you're contractually obligated
Yeah,
to
you're not
do.
actually breaking.
You're
I
not breaking
suppose
no rules.
it's
But
predicated that you will do more. That's
yeah,
the model. The model that we have is that whatever job you do more.
well, I think these kids are
Yeah,
breaking
because
that mold,
I think,
and
I think, as you said,
I'm glad.
they're more informed.
Yeah.
When you start to realize that um, there are people who are fabulously wealthy,
Mm.
and they are fabulously wealthy off of your back.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be where it's okay to be rich. In fact, you know what they always say: be quietly rich, because the minute you become very loud at it, people notice it. And I think we now live in a world where, in the last maybe 30 years, where it's been, we celebrate wealth. We celebrate wealth as being smart,
Yeah.
when it might not be smart. It might be,
I don't
it
think it's
could
got
be,
anything to do with it. It's
yeah, it could just be right place, right time. I mean, I'm not saying it's
just
not,
formula.
or it's going to be exploitation. Some of the richest companies now that we see around us have exploited nations to build what they make.
Mm.
The whole
Yeah,
concept of the sweatshop came about because, but these people,
exactly.
but the
Yeah.
end of the line, someone's a billionaire over it. You know,
Yeah.
So the idea of this quiet quitting is, there's if you own a business, you do not want your people to quietly quit. You want them to be engaged. You want them to be a part of it. So the way to counteract quiet quitting is to be a good boss, is to be a good manager, is to fight their corner. When that person says, I need a pay rise, go out of your way to do it. Because the options are, you fight for their corner, and you do what you can to make them like what they do. Because I think most people who you see go above and beyond is because they like their boss. There's a relationship beyond just work employee. So they go out of their. Sorry,
you think so?
Yeah, I think that most people. I think people who are working, people who go above and beyond, there's a selfishness in the sense of I want to improve my lot in life. I want to get to the next stage, whether it be a pay increase or a job increase. But if you're working for someone that you hate, you ain't gonna go out of your way. Who goes out of their way to work for someone they don't like?
True.
Because you don't like them. Why are you going to spend any more time than is necessary for someone that you don't like? But if you do, it helps if you're a good manager and you can blur the line in a sense, because you could say, look, I need you to stay up. I need you to stay afterwards. I will try and sort you out with a bit of OT, or I'll give you, work later for me today and finish early tomorrow. Do you know what I mean? There's lots of things that you can do to make.
Sounds like you've said that before. You're a good boss, man. You're a good boss. You're a good boss.
But there's lots of things that you can do to try and make the world you're in a better place. I know I'm quoting Michael Jackson there, but do you understand what I mean?
Yeah,
but if
yeah,
you
absolutely.
work for a tyrant, if someone you work for, all they're interested in is their own goals, because keep it in mind, everyone's got targets. You got targets, I got targets. We've all got targets. We've all got things that we need to achieve, and it's how you get to that. Do you screw everybody over to get to that point? If your boss tells you, right, yeah, of course they do. Right, Johnny, I'm going to bonus you a certain amount of money if I make sure that if you keep the budget of overtime down by a certain percentage. If you say, right, I'll bonus you if you keep everyone down. That's a horrible thing to have to do, because you get bonused by screwing all your colleagues over.
Yep.
But it's a reality of life. That's how this model works. This model works on that premise that you could potentially be in a situation where actually you're going to get bonused if you make sure these guys do all their work within their basic and not a penny over. It's harsh, but it is the world we live in. It's reality.
It's a harsh reality.
Harsh reality. But the trade-off to that is if you get the work, because you've got to remember that this is the other thing as well. If that person completes their task during their time, they're a good worker.
Yeah.
Remember, if this person is actually getting all their work done within their 8-hour day or 10-hour day or 12-hour day, whatever it is, then there isn't much of an argument, is there? They're actually they're actually doing what they're meant to be doing. And
I think it's the fact that people are being pushed to do more.
Yeah.
With less and for less. So, like you said, if you're being paid the overtime, or if you're doing your time with your work within your time, bosses generally don't care. They're comfortable that you're doing what you need to do. But I think when there are, like you said, some tyrants out there that are trying to go above and beyond, and doing it in a way that puts all of the people underneath them at peril, because it affects people's mental health.
Of course it does.
That type of harassment and leaving people sort of, I think I get it. I think it's and
especially when you
growing
realize,
trend.
Especially when you realize that this pressure that's being pushed downhill is not life or death, it's just profit. When you realize that a lot of these pressures that are being put on people, it's not about the company's going to go under if you don't do this. It's I need to pay shareholders. I need your labor. I'm going to pay you the least amount I can get away with, so that I can give the most I can get away with to the shareholder.
So what's wrong with the worker doing that back to because that's the same thing.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And you've hit the nail right on the head. So listen to this. The impact of quiet quitting and disengagement on companies and the economy is significant. The in the cost to the global economy last year was $8.9 trillion. So I don't know what that is in pounds, or 9% of global gross domestic product. So
Really?
almost 10% on this is how serious this is. This is,
Wow.
we're not talking about one or two people doing this. We are talking about millions of people currently are doing it right now. They may not even know that they're doing it. That's the thing, because they may not have heard what is quite quick.
Do you think that a lot of people are there's a move, and the reason why I think they're saying this and trying to make it seem as though by doing what you're supposed to do, you're quitting, just by doing what you're contractually obligated to do, that's a form of quitting. Like that narrative, that word that you're actually trying to inject into the argument, when really you're not actually quitting, you're just working to the rules.
Very
that
interesting.
Are set, right?
The power of words.
The power of words. But look at what's happening with commercial real estate. So people are working at home, not in the offices. Prices, the global corporate real estate is sitting empty in a lot of cities around the world.
Yeah,
these people want their workers back in because they think that everyone's on a jolly when they're working at home. Yeah. So
but I feel like this is it now, isn't it? That the COVID.
Oh, you can't put the genie back in the bottle.
No, I think COVID showed us that we don't, which could be the beginnings. We could be saying in 30 years' time, this was the beginning of the death of cities, of megacities, because 200 years. Not that I'm trying to get it's going to sound boring, but the history lesson is quite clear. We lived in farms in the country 200 years ago. 200 years ago, we lived in cities. We didn't live in cities. We lived on the land. We were in the country. And then someone thought it's better to put them all together. They'll do well if they're all together. And we put them all together. And I think now we're realizing, actually, maybe we need to go back out into the country, which is why, during COVID, how many homes in Cornwall got bought? How many people bought houses out in the sticks and have not come back? They just haven't come back. They're not going to come back because there's nothing that's going to make them do the rat race, going into the city, sitting on tube. And I mean, just thinking
3-hour commutes.
3-hour commute. So you imagine you work for your money only to then lose 3 hours of your time just trying to get back home, only to do that same thing. It's funny, when I was doing that, when I was going into the city every day, it got to a point where I was trying to find different ways to get to work. So on some days I would take I lived by the river. So there were some days I would take the riverboat service up to Embankment or up to Canary Wharf. And that's nothing. So there would be days where I would take the riverboat all the way to the Embankment and get off. There were other days I'd get off at Canary Wharf and get on the underground. Just because my brain
you needed to break up the monotony.
And then there were other days where I would go to Surrey Quays and get on it there and walk. I used to do everything in my power just to break up that
routine.
Because it was crazy. But maybe in some ways, see, I've never quietly quit, and I'm jealous of people that were able to do that. And in many ways, I look at the youngsters today with a certain element of admiration. And I admire
I agree with that.
I admire their their strength, that they're not taking it, they're not accepting the norm, they're pushing the boundaries and pushing back. But then I understand why, and I believe that reason is economic. I believe that they are looking at other, as you said, the power of word. They're not quiet quitting. They're just doing what they're obligated to do without any, with no, they're not going
guilty about
it. They don't
it.
need to.
Yeah.
And if they're finding other opportunities, even better, because they need to.
Good for them.
For us, our generation, we didn't necessarily have that opportunity because we were still being told that the work model.
Find a good job.
Yeah, find a good job, settle in, don't leave, pay into the pension, stay there forever. You find a job and just stay there, which is part of the reason why, you know, our ancestors went to British Gas, British Telecom, you know, went onto the underground, the buses, and stayed there forever, and never pushed the boundary, never said, and was scared to even do anything else, and certainly would not. I mean, there is obviously a cultural aspect to that conversation, because I believe
I was going to
when
say
our
that.
you know, when our relatives came over to this country, even though you could walk in and out of a job, it was a lot harder when you were not indigenous, shall we say. Obviously times have changed now and it's a lot better, and obviously but there is still that element of fear, like I have to go through the, you know, the vetting procedure again, and does my name sound English enough? You know, there's lots of reasons why that could potentially cause problems for you.
It's another aspect,
but again, very, very impressed